Recently, we followed ShopStop's Randy Taylor to Pauls Valley for a no-till planter workshop. Today, we want to bring you some highlights from that event.
This needs to run level. If you don't have the row unit set, if you don't have the toolbar set where it's level when you've got it in the ground, then the first thing you got to do is you've changed the angle. Let's say it's running nose down. You change the angle where these discs engage the soil. If you're in a clean till environment or you're in some kind of tilled soil, you can probably get away with that. But when you start thinking if you're going to go to no-till, you can't. And that's the thing. The big difference between planting in a conventional system and no-till is the conditions are less forgiving, okay? You can make a lot of mistakes in a conventional system with a planter and come out okay. You make those same mistakes in a no-till system and your neighbors will drive by your field and go, what the heck is he doing? The second thing is, when you start looking at planters, the first thing generally that's going to wear out from a soil engaging standpoint is the opener discs. If you look at those where those discs come together, the John Deeres, the Whites, the Kinseys, all of them, they have what we call even discs. So those discs are going to be, they come together and match. Basically what you want is you want about 2 inches of touch on them. If they're touching, then where they're engaging the soil, you're in one place. Both of them are cutting in the same slot. Once they start to wear, those discs get spread apart and that area gets a little smaller. And now what you're doing is you're cutting a wider slot with them because the discs are kind of spreading out a little bit and you're not engaging the soil the same. Now, that really becomes critical when you throw residue into the mix. Guys that have been in no-till a long time, what they find out is that top ½ inch might be just right, but it'll be really wet under there. Too wet to plant, but it's not going to dry out. And so that's where you've got to figure out, okay, what am I doing? And now I get to that point where I start smearing my sidewalls, and you run into that, what they call sidewall compaction, and all your roots are growing right down the trench instead of breaking through it. The way I deal with that is with the closing wheel, we're running one of these on each side. We're running a standard John Deere wheel and one of these Martin spike wheels on one side. I've got enough, I can run them all, and in some conditions I will. If I get in that red clay out west of Stillwater, we've got some no-till fields out there, I'll probably put both of them on because it's a little more aggressive. And basically what I want, if I'm planting into that wet soil like that, it's breaking that edge. Because I'm running my Keaton, I'm getting good seed soil contact from my seed firmer. And now I'm not relying on my press wheels to give me seed soil contact. All I want to know now is I just want to close that top over it because I've got good seed soil contact. And so in general, depending on where we are, we're running a standard Deere wheel on one side to give us, it's just less aggressive. When you run 2 of these on there and you set very much pressure on that back, you got a chance to plow seed out with them. So you got to be careful about that. The running a standard rubber wheel with it kind of keeps me from doing that. If you're going to go no-till, you got to have downforce. And we bought for our planter, I bought it and it just had the single springs on it. That's not enough. That's not going to hold it in the ground with in a no-till environment. Fine out here. I bought the heavy-duty ones that go in the center, the double springs with the T-handle on it that Deere has. We bought those and put on ours. I was in Mexico several years ago and they filled the insecticide boxes with rocks. That's Downforce too. But then you got to lift that up, when you lift your planter up. But Downforce is going to be key as you go into less, and that's where the adjustable downforce might come into play, is because you say, how much downforce do I need? Well, you need enough, but you don't need too much. And what that is, it probably depends on the conditions. You don't want to put a lot of weight down on there, but you want to keep. If you can grab these gauge wheels, when you engage, when the planter's in the ground, if you can grab one of these gauge wheels and turn it, you don't have enough downforce because it's not on the ground. My preference is always to leave residue standing. And the reason I leave it standing is if it's standing, I don't have to cut it. If I knock it down, it's on the ground, and now I've got to deal with it. We'll either run row cleaners. If the row cleaners aren't working like I like them, I'm just going to screw them all the way up. and get them out of my way, and I'm going to plant with the planter as it is. And because the double disc, if they're adjusted right, will cut residue. Here's the other thing too. When you think about no-till, is you can't plant at 8 o'clock in the morning. You got to think about planting no-till like you harvest wheat. If there's any moisture in that residue, it's going to be tough to cut. You get a dew on it, it's going to be tough to cut it, and it's not going to do well. And matter of fact, I looked at a bunch of data. I had like 3,000 acres of corn data from these 3 farmers that I worked with in northeast Kansas. All of them had GPS on their tractors, so I knew, and I recorded which hybrids they were planting. So I knew which hybrids they planted, where they planted them, what day they planted it on, what time of day they planted them. All that straight out of the GPS information that we had. They planted early in the morning, they didn't get as good yields. Now, it wasn't a lot, and it wasn't highly significant, but it certainly, it fit into what they were saying. It's like, you know what? Some of the fields that I planted early in the morning, I don't think I got as good a stands. This is just their observation. And their data would say that, well, they didn't yield as well. And then later in the day as well. So there was probably about a 6-hour window in the middle of the day where their yields are pretty much optimized. I grew up in eastern Oklahoma. I'm a duct tape and baling wire guy. But if you're thinking no-till, you better be thinking a chaff spreader if you're growing wheat or soybeans. It's because what happens is you get that concentrated chaff, not just the chaff, but the straw. Primarily the chaff, what comes over the shoe, is going to get you more than anything, because there's not much spread in that. But that chaff insulates the soil. And now I got wet soil under it, maybe dry soil out here. And you guys already have the problem of 4 or 5 different soil conditions you're planting through in the same field already. There's no reason to create another one. My best advice is when you're going out to plant in the morning, you stop off at the 7-Eleven or the Quick Trip or whatever and get you that big value drink, okay? Biggest one they got. Coffee, pop, whatever you drink in the morning. And drink the whole thing before you start planting. Because that's going to make sure that you're going to get a chance to adjust your planter and check your seed depth pretty soon, okay? So, and that's a big key. Get off and see what it's doing. Dig for seed and see.
If you have questions about setting up your farm machinery, send them to Randy and Wayne through the Contact Us link on sunup.okstate.edu.